As part of Welcoming Week, which is a national initiative to build welcoming and inclusive communities, and in support of the Shoreline City Council Resolution 467, stating the city's commitment to building an anti-racist community, we're pleased to have local racial equity consultants and Shoreline resident Kevin Henry and Jolene Jang.
Thank you, Suni, and I want to thank everybody for being here today to talk about a really important and critical subject as we move forward as a community and a society. I think for a lot of people, the last couple of years have been very trying, very traumatic, especially when it comes to COVID, and then looking at the country as a whole and seeing that a lot of the racial problems that we maybe thought were a thing of the past are actually a thing of the present. As disturbing and as unsettling as a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of years are, I think there are also opportunities for us to learn, to understand what's really going on with diverse populations, as well as experience personal growth. So what we really want to do today is really try and understand and delve into the issues that are behind racism, behind Asian hate, behind any kind of hate directed at any person totally based on their ethnicity or their culture or their gender identity, et cetera. Now, as we explore these very complex and historically based issues, it's really important that we take that information and turn those words into action. So that way we can move forward. One of the things that we really emphasize here today is that everybody plays a role, whether you're a business owner, you're a single mom, you're a teacher, you're a faith leader, or you're just a kind of a regular resident of Shoreline. Everybody plays a role because we all need to come together to address these issues. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And I hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Jolene Jang.
I know, get Asians Unfiltered.
Asians Unfiltered.
Well said. I wanted to let you know that, oh, by the way, I'm Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish. And went to the Northshore School District, went to Lockwood, Kenmore, Inglemore. My dad was class of 59. He went to Bothell. My mom went to Garfield. So pretty local here. And I wanted to let you know that there is indeed hate in our neighborhood. My specialty recently is around StopAsianHate. So I just wanted to share a few of the incidences happened recently. So it was last month, there was an Asian woman here in Shoreline and her cat was shot. And then it was last week in North Seattle, this is Pinehurst, there was an Asian woman and she was walking back home and this car was following her and, giving her racial slurs and then drove at her, and she was, yelling for help, but nobody's there to help. And she was able to get into the house. But that's pretty scary. And you probably have heard of this one. This is also in Shoreline, where there's a Vietnamese lady and her older white neighbor has been harassing her for a long time. And this is on Nextdoor. And actually, there's a breaking point for Asians. There's a breaking point. And so she was on the news. And this lady recently was on her property and in front of the Vietnamese woman's window, and the lady dropped her pants in front of the toddler, the 2-year-old. Just a couple more. So in Lake Forest Park, there was also an Asian guy who was walking his dog, and he had to jump out of the way to not get run over. A lady tried to run him over. In Kenmore, and I have his anonymous interview. This Asian couple and their baby were walking around, doing their little walk, and this truck drove at them. This is more of an intimidation. It's his neighbor. So he lives two houses down. I actually was sitting in, I went to go talk to the victim and I was actually sitting in the guy who owns the truck. I was like, oh, whoa, okay. And my aunt was also followed. She was from my house, from Lake Forest Park to Kenmore and then back to Shoreline because she was trying to get the person to stop. My aunt is like, 70 something. And I no longer walk alone. I'm pretty active. I'm pretty tough, hang out in Harlem, whatever, but I no longer walk alone. I'm only escorted. I barely leave my house. The 2 out of the 4 times that I did walk, I had some situations. So it is not a safe place. So those are just a few, and these are just recent. So go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to what Jolene was talking about. Over the years, I've gotten into conversations with people where I will say, oh, that was a racist statement, or, oh, that was a racist act. And people will say, well, how do you know that was racist? That could have just been a joke, or maybe they didn't mean it that way. There are so many different shades and forms of racism that it doesn't always have to be this blatant thing of a cross burning or a swastika or a racial slur. It can be slower service at a restaurant. It can be body language. It can be innuendo. And I tell people, think about how many times there's somebody, a coworker or somebody and you got, I don't really think Jolene likes me. Well, why do you say that? Well, every time she comes in the room, she does this. Or when I say something, she's very dismissive. Or it can be so very subtle. So I encourage people to look beyond just the blatant acts and look at the deeper layers of racism and what that looks like. The same thing happened with in Black Lives Matter, in that Black Lives Matter took the center stage for the last couple of years, but that doesn't mean that there's not hate targeting other people, such as Asian communities. And Jolene, I wanted you to speak to this a little bit, because we've talked about this, about how some cultures, because it could be a community, it could be a generational thing, aren't necessarily as vocal about saying that they've experienced this. Because I know, and I know you'll get into this in a little while, I think it was on Nextdoor where people were saying, well, I'm Asian and I haven't seen any of this stuff. Well, just because you haven't seen something or someone hasn't talked about it doesn't mean it's not happening. Think about all the sexual assault and sexual harassment cases that have been in the news, where you say, well, why did they say something? Well, not everybody talks about it. Maybe you could talk a little bit more how that relates to maybe some of the Asian cultures, Jolene.
Well, in the Asian culture, and think about this, we're talking about 48 countries here. So in the Asian culture, all 48, there are some generalities, but it is more recent. The Asian cultures have come over here, and so it's really just a heads down. Don't cause any problems, just move through it. Yeah, you're going to struggle, but just move through it. It's all about the collective. America is about individual, be your own person, and whatever, and try and be an individual. The Asian cultures are more about collectivism. What's best for the group? What's best for the group is for me to mix in and just assimilate. And so that's what it's all about. And Kevin and I do both have podcasts, and I will spend some time talking about why people are silent, both Asian cultures and the other people. So that is a big thing. But I think we were talking the other day, Kevin, about how the Black Lives Movement, so it's out on the street and it's out there and it's like making a big deal, and it's physical as well. You're walking, and I'm not going to be marching. I'm not going to be out during COVID, but during BLM, I was on my computer, posting and sharing a lot. And I'm not also out there marching for Asians. I mean, almost nobody is. I mean, I think the biggest group was 90 people, and it was all Asians. But there's different ways that we protest. And so I was talking to a Washington State representative yesterday, and then I'll connect with another one. So that is how I do my thing. I am not out there with signs, and during COVID also. So we have different ways that we do this. So I kind of wanted to show that BLM and Asian cultures are very different.
Well, yeah, great point. And the other thing I wanted to emphasize too, and I learned this, I saw this when I worked at the city of Bellevue for 20 years. And quite often we would say, the city council or whoever it was would say, we want to hear from our diverse community. So we're inviting people to come down to City Hall, and you have 3 minutes to talk about, whatever the oral communications, that's what they called it. And they have 3 minutes to talk about whatever they want. I said, well, that again is more of an American kind of white American ideal of like, well, if you got something to say, here's your 3 minutes. You can write an op-ed, you can write an editorial, you can go on a local talk show and call the host. Well, that's not comfortable for everybody. It's not very comfortable for especially immigrant families, I think, to go to City Hall, which is intimidating enough sometimes, and stand before 30, 40 people. You're live streaming, and the city council sits before you like Mount Rushmore, and you expect people to be able to talk about things that are bothering them. A lot of times, certain cultures or certain individuals are encouraged to just ignore it. Just let it roll off your back. Just, oh, those people have mental issues. Like even the woman dropping her pants. Well, she's obviously got mental issues. Well, you can have mental issues. I don't doubt that she has mental issues, but that doesn't mean that she still can't do harm. Who knows if she has kids and she's spreading that type of hateful rhetoric and attitude in her own family. It has to be addressed. One victim of a hate crime is one victim too many. So when people say, like to you, Jolene, maybe you could, I think you'll get into this anyway. Well, I'm Asian, or I'm Black, I don't see anything. Well, again, how can you know what's going on around the corner? I live in a condominium with 60 units. I don't know what's going on right now in the other 59. So for me to say, well, there's no problems, nobody's arguing here, nobody's having any issues, would be ludicrous. So I really encourage people to get over their denial and their reluctance in wanting to talk about racial issues and move forward. Because like an infection, you know what happens if you ignore an infection. It does not go away. It might hide for a little while. You might not have any symptoms, and then it comes back and it kills you, or limbs start falling off. Back to you, Jolene.
Well, thank you. With that, you just left me with limbs falling off. Kevin and I are saying there is hate in the neighborhoods, and it is around us. How do you find it? Kevin was mentioning City Hall, and that is a great place to figure out what people are thinking. These are going to be the louder people. I testified for Kenmore. I made comment at City Hall at Kenmore. I think I was the only one who was not yelling or angry. I mean, certainly I am angry, but I was kind. And there was a guy who was he was adamant that we must take our land. We need it. We can't name that. It's our land. Because there was a name change going back to a Native American name. And he's like, this is our land. We own this. And he was just like, it was incredible. And he's being recorded. Like he believes that is the way. And it was pretty eye-opening to see people very animated about what they believe. And so that is a great spot to learn and to step out of your echo chamber. One of the many challenges with trying to share about racism that it exists is that people are in their echo chambers. I am too. But we need to step out in order to see what actually is going on. And Nextdoor is a beautiful example. It is thriving with anger and hate all over the place. So people will say it's toxic. Oh, yes, it is. I don't want to be in there. Yeah, but this is reality. People are believing this way, and it is not an echo chamber. People speak their minds. And it is important because I don't like to be there either, but we got to be there.
Well, and if I could just jump in on that, as difficult as it is for me sometimes, and I have to bite my lip, sometimes I've bitten my tongue off, not responding to some comments that I've seen on Facebook. I mean, sometimes there'll be an article or a post on Facebook, and it'll say, something about, it could even be people who are homeless, or it could be Asian hate. And then you get people that are just making snarky, dismissive, there's too much emphasis on race. That's the problem. We talk about this too much. If we just don't talk about it, it'll go away. So I think, well, if we don't talk about cancer, I guess it'll just go away, right? So I force myself to read these comments because I want to know what people are thinking, because these aren't people on a different planet. These are the person across the street. It could be the checker at Safeway. And those are their true feelings. I want to know. I would rather know what's behind the smile or what's behind the passivity, because I need to know that. I think too often we are sideswiped. By now, oh, I had no idea Jolene thought that. I've known her for 20 years. You know, I didn't know she was against interracial marriage or something like that. Those are the kind of things that I used to run into over time. So what I'm encouraging people to do is find your lane. Somebody said to me, a young white woman who moved here from Iowa, she said, I hate racism. I want to do something, but I don't feel comfortable marching. I said, you don't have to march. There's documentaries to read. There's Facebook groups you can join, like USOR or the Northshore Coalition. These are places where you can learn more, and you don't have to march. You don't have to argue with your Uncle Bill, but this is going to affect you in some way down the line. And the thing about systemic racism and structural racism is that it's hidden a lot of times. You see the symptoms, but like a doctor, you have to go, okay, this person's got these symptoms. What's causing them? So I encourage you to dig deeper.
I'm just going to go ahead and share on Nextdoor to shed some reality on everybody here. Just in case you are not on Nextdoor, I asked one of our Asian allies who was here. So I have two groups, Asian allies, because an ally for all people is good, but like Black allies and Asian allies, like how you advocate for the different populations is kind of different. And so I started an Asian allies group for support, and an empowered Asian group as well. One of the gentlemen I asked to promote this, hey, can you put this at City of Shoreline is doing Unify Shoreline? And he did. And, one of the first comments was, exactly what insidious assault on our Asian neighbors are you referring to? Because there certainly hasn't been any in LFP. My wife and in-laws are Chinese American. One of our neighbors is Vietnamese American, and another's Indian American. We've lived in LFP for 20 years and can't recall a single incident of anti-Asian behavior in all that time. So that's basically, there was a post like, hey, Unify Shoreline. And here he is, no hate. I married a Chinese lady, so there is none. And then another one.
Yep, that's easy.
Yeah. And another older white guy. My wife is Asian also, kid is half, with 50 family members. When recently polled, no hate, nor did they know of any. This is not a trend. However, Chinese media is doing their best to frame the narrative differently, and it's just, again, so we have these two white men who married Asians. And so because their wives told them there's nothing out there, then there is none. And so what we need as community members is for you to say, no, let's listen to the people on here. And so there's actually, I didn't grab that, but there was a great comment of, hey, by the way, I'm glad that your people have not, your relatives haven't had any Asian hate. That's great, fantastic. But the people, because there's Asians on here who are saying, yeah, actually there is, and I have. And basically they're dismissing, ignoring, and saying, hey, let's not do anything because there's nothing going on, and dismissing all of us, basically tell us we're lying. And so something as innocent as posting this event always gets hate, and the armies are starting to come in now they're usually older white men and who are retired. There's a lot, people spend a lot of time on here, like hours and hours. And so we need you all to know this is happening and say, no, and also validate the people who are courageous enough to share. And so this is just, I have content daily of deniers, and it is,
You're up to you've probably almost bitten your tongue right through.
I don't engage so much in this because it is not a safe place for me. These are neighbors. And I think that one of my posts during Me Too was probably the most prolific one. And I actually looked up a couple people to see if they're on the sex offender list, because I did not feel comfortable. That was like the biggest probably of the year. My post was it. And it was very scary. So I do not feel safe in here. So I don't engage that much. I ask Asian allies who are white to share things, and I may just kind of chime in and listen, but I'm not gonna, because it's a very scary place.
Well, and I wanted to jump in on the ally thing, because allies are important. I love allies. I feel that especially people who are willing to step out of their comfort zone voluntarily to do this work, I'm totally behind them 100%. What I would like to see more of, though, is that when we have listening sessions and I've been on several Zoom calls, listening sessions with law enforcement, for instance. And what happens is you get kind of a consultant facilitator person who's facilitating the conversation. You might have a police chief or some officers from law enforcement. And then you have, mostly white, from what I've seen, people who are advocates for certain communities. So it's the faith leader, it's the social worker, somebody like that. The people who are actually being targeted in a lot of cases are never, or I have not seen them represented on those calls. You have people speaking for them. And I think we need to find ways to really talk to, the retired Asian man or Black man that lives in the neighborhood, to really find out what's going on. But I think that those people have to feel empowered. And part of Welcoming Week has to be engaging those people, because some people are very easy to engage. They'll say, oh yeah, hey, I'm cool, I'm there, there at the Zoom meeting, I'm down there at the march. But there's a lot of people, for some of the reasons we mentioned, that are reluctant. In some cases, when I was in Bellevue, I would talk to immigrant families who were reluctant to engage with City Hall or the city of Bellevue, because in their country, government and the police are people you did not want to interact with. So we have to, I think, spend extra effort getting those people who aren't being represented. Get the homeless person on the call in addition to the homeless advocate.
We need to engage people and really hear what they're saying. I agree. And let me just go back to Nextdoor. What was exciting is that on this recent post, promoting this, I think it was 4 or 5 days ago, there was a white man dismissing, like, there's no Asian hate. Another white man, no, you're right, there is none. But along the way, there were about 4 Asians who said, yeah, this, I was yelled at here and this and this, and Asians spoke up, because that usually does not happen. And I think that was because Asian ally white man, who was very active in Nextdoor and on this call, put it out there. And so here was support. And then there's other Asian lady who's very much, she's number one. She's like out there. And so it felt more supported. I even said a little bit, because I felt a little bit more supported. And that is what we need. And there were several other people who are not Asian who are saying, yeah, we need to listen and validate, and let's not dismiss what these Asians are saying. Kevin, you were talking about, talking to homeless and being at City Hall and these big things, but we can also little tiny things like engaging in Nextdoor, making comments, even liking, like showing support. As an Asian American, I have such little support. It is unbelievable. So let me talk a moment about anti-Asian hate. Silence is deadly. Silence is horrible. I have a white community. Let's see. I was president of the National Speakers Association for the state of Washington for 3 years, and very active for like 12. And so I really go hard at whatever I do. And so it was the white community. I was the only person of color at any of the meetings. And so I have a white network, and I've been speaking up for the last 190 days around Stop Asian Hate, because now the media, it's kind of dwindling, but the media with Atlanta was on it. So, all right, well, let's figure out what's going on, and I'll speak up. But my network, which is white, is completely silent. The only people who engage with me are my Asian allies.
Please elaborate on Atlanta, because some people might not know what you're
okay. The Atlanta shootings, where 6 Asian women were shot. And because that got national news, then all the news to the other Asians that are being attacked, and Asians are being attacked nearly every single day, and actually have a timeline to actually show you as well. But back to the silence thing, silence is awful. And I have mostly white, liberal, independent women friends, and they're out there on the marches, the Pride Parade and BLM, and just like do-gooders, except for Stop Asian Hate. So now I'm not seen as like them. They're always like, oh, you're just like me. They don't say you're white, but they're like, you're just like me. And I'm like, no. And, they mean well, right? They're like, oh, I don't see you as different. I don't see you as Asian. I don't see you as, they're trying to compliment me. They're not aware that they're, kind of insulting me because they're not trying to, but they are. And now that everything I do is around Stop Asian Hate, they want to see happy, bubbly pull-ups in a dress. What are you discovering? Who are you meeting today? That's the person they want to see. My focus is to stop Asians from being stabbed and killed. And so silence that they are giving me is not helpful. It's painful. And I'm not the only Asian out there whose friends are completely silent. People haven't reached out. And so be aware that when you're feeling uncomfortable, like, oh, I don't know what to do. Should I reach out to my church friend? I don't really know her that well, but I should, but I don't know. Do show you care, be uncomfortable. You may say the wrong thing, but you tried, take the risk. The whole silence piece is really pretty awful. So go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some great questions in the chat, and I can't wait to address the difference between microaggressions and overt racism, one of my favorite topics. But anyway, I just wanted to add that sometimes I just have to laugh, because it's like when you say, Jolene, I don't see you as Asian. I just see you as Jolene. So if we were walking down the street and somebody ran up to you and started calling you Asian horrible names based on your ethnicity and started attacking you physically, I would tell that person, well, Jolene she's not Asian. She's just
25%
Jolene.
Swedish.
She's 25% Swedish. So it's just the ridiculousness of this whole I don't see color thing. It's like, if I pretend it's not there, then it won't be. So I think people need to burst that reality bubble that they're stuck in. But the difference between microaggressions and overt racism. Microaggressions are particularly insidious because it's the kind of thing where have you ever been in a situation where you're going, I just don't think Jolene likes me. I've been working with her and she's always late showing up to our meetings, and then she'll make some comment about how, what I like to eat, and she'll say something like, I'll say to Jolene, hey, Jolene, know any good Japanese restaurants? I'm sure, I assumed you would know all the great Japanese restaurants to work. Oh, I'm sorry, did I offend you? Oh, hey, I'm just curious. It's those jokes, those little racial jokes that people make, and they say, oh, I was just kidding. I'm just teasing you, kind of thing. A lot of it are those insinuations. It's like one time, I've seen it with single moms, for instance, where there's insinuations made about them being on welfare. Oh, well, you're on welfare, right? Those are microaggressions because they're not direct. They're not direct in that saying, Jolene, I don't like Asians because I feel they're responsible for COVID. That's direct. That's overt racism. If I were to say, hey, tell me about those labs where they were doing those experiments with those viruses, I figured you'd know about it. That's a microaggression. It's those kinds of insults, indirect insults. I hope that answered the question.
Kevin, you just posted your gaslighting video too. Do you want to explain gaslighting to everybody? And gaslighting was a new term to me too. I'm relatively new on this trip.
Yeah, basically gaslighting is when you interact with someone and you usually are confronting them in some way. You're saying, I feel like you don't care enough about our committee work here that because you keep showing up late, Jolene, and then Jolene somehow convinces me that I'm the one who's crazy, or I'm imagining things. Oh, you just imagine that I rolled my eyes at you and dominated the conversation at the meeting. Why are you being so sensitive? Why are you always, Jolene, why are you always talking about race and Stop Asian Hate so much? I think you might need a therapist.
Okay, so let me just cut in right there. So, so my best friend who's in my will, we had this conversation early on, and she was like, I'm really concerned about you. You're angry.
Yeah.
Asians that look like my relatives are being stabbed almost every day. Why aren't you angry? She's like, you need to see a therapist. And the idea, like, what, or hey, just turn off the news. You don't need to see it. It's like, and it's just these, when we ignore, when we can shut it down, there's mental health, of course, like, okay, you need a mental health day, like no news today. I get that. But when you just want to escape and be in your own little world, that's not cool, because, like, Kevin, you can't just take off your black skin. Like, you're black.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Every day, 24/7. I don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm black. No, it's not like that. But you know what? I just want to take the gaslighting a step further, in that a lot of times part of gaslighting is basically taking a problem that really belongs to somebody else and putting it on you. So it's like if Jolene moves into a neighborhood and you say, my neighbors are rude to me and they've made some racial comments. And I say, well, Jolene, why don't you just move? It's like all of a sudden, wait a minute, why should I move because someone else has a problem and is a racist? It's just like when sexual assault victims are on trial, and it's like, well, you did let him buy you a drink, didn't you? You were wearing a revealing outfit, therefore it was okay for him to assault you. Is that the question? So I think too often, again, we get so apprehensive and uncomfortable about dealing with this sticky, delicate issue that we try and get away from it in some way.
And a few examples from my end is, so I went walking when I used to go walking by myself, and I was actually right outside my folks' house, and it's a small street, and I was in sweatshirt, baggy, whatever, hair, not looking so attractive, and then there was this guy. Hey, I love you. Oh, come here, honey. Oh, I love you. And he was a ways away, maybe 100 feet. And he was like kind of out of his car. And there was one person around. There was one car behind him. Otherwise, it was deserted. I'm like, oh, is this happening right now? And I, got out my phone. I'm like, I'm ready and I can run. And there was a car there. But, my two people very close to me were like, like my good friend was like, you know what? Whenever I go to Green Lake, I get cat calls all the time. And I don't get cat calls. I don't ever remember, maybe 30 years ago or something. Like, I can't even remember. I don't get cat calls. And I'm in the suburbs on a small street by a little park in my sweats. This is not a cat call. And so the idea, like, yeah, no, it's fine. Or, you're attractive woman, and it's just like, when I say something, don't tell me that it's not valid. And that is a big deal. Another, also, you're so focused on Asian hate. I think you're amplifying. Like, it's like, it's not really there. I mean, maybe there's some, but it's not really, you just see it more because you're focused on it. It's not really that prevalent. And I'm fine. I can walk around fine. Why are you concerned to walk around the streets? Okay, blonde, blue-eyed white man who's telling me this. It's a different thing. Like, how do you know what it's like to be an Asian woman at this time walking on the street? Do you know? Because you don't. And so when people are like, don't worry about it, and so a term that I also learned because I'm studying this, toxic positivity, because people are like, you know what? Just relax. Just be happy. You know what? Just be your sparkly self. Just be positive. It's like, okay, I am hitting the wall trying to get people to care about Asians. And it's hard. And, I see Asians dying way more than you think. And so just be happy. That's not helpful. And so as you step into wanting to be a great neighbor, listen more and try not to justify. I think this is kind of more of a masculine thing, and I do this too. I want to solve people's problem. Oh, what's your problem? Okay, let me help you solve it. But in this type of case, this is not the way it goes. People need to be heard and validated, and our feelings are our feelings. And so listen, and you don't know that it's going to be okay when I walk out in this street. You don't. There's been four let's drive at Asians just in our neighborhood here in Lake Forest Park Shoreline. So it's like, yeah. So just wanted to put that out there.
Well, and I think it's important for people to remember that everyone has their own lived experience. And when you're the dominant culture and the country, even though it's changing, it's still predominantly white. You can go places and not even see people of color. I was just in Idaho and Spokane for 2 days. I did not see I did see one Asian woman. I did not see any Black people in Coeur d'Alene. I don't know if there are any. And I've been to Montana. I've been to especially the rural areas in the country where I'm the only one. And I'm thinking, would most white people feel okay if they were the only one in a state full of Black people or Asians or whatever? And you can go do that. You could go to a different country and experience that, or you could even drive yourself to a certain neighborhood and experience that. But it's important to remember that your lens is your lens. It's your lived experiences, which is fine, nothing to feel guilty about, but be open to hearing other people's interpretations, other people's lived experiences. It's just like I could read all about childbirth, but I do not know what it's like to deliver a baby. I can't say, well, I read that and I saw that on YouTube, therefore I know exactly what it's like. I did want to address one of the things in the chat about what kind of predominantly white community do to be more welcoming. I made suggestions to businesses. Sometimes I go into a business and I see artwork, that kind of bland artwork somebody got from Fred Meyer or something with pictures of flowers and things like that. Why not if you're a business owner, put up artwork on your menu, on your website, in your business of cultural artwork? There's all kinds of little things that add up. Instead of going to Albertsons and Safeway, go to an Asian market, do some shopping, get to know the people there, go to a church service. I went to a church service one time that was all in Russian and I had an English interpreter. Start getting out of your comfort zone and breaking up your routine. If maybe you have a neighborhood crime watch, go door to door and invite, and especially invite your neighbors of color to come to the crime watch. Show up with a box of cookies or something. Check out movies. Call people out. If you hear somebody say something questionable, don't say, "Oh God, I wish Uncle Bill wouldn't keep saying that stuff." Say, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." Again, it's stepping out of that routine and that comfort zone. Diversity and being anti-racist is not a check the box thing. It's like being a parent. You aren't a parent 3 days a week. You're a parent all the time. Now, you might be more active in 1 week and less active in the next, but you never stop being an anti-racist person. It's just part of who you are, and it's part of your lifestyle. Back to you, Jolene.
And it's about being curious, like, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. Because we got to be listening. We got to be listening a lot more and reading and understanding. I'm learning a ton. The Asian, 48 countries, that's a lot. I'm Japanese, Chinese, Swedish. I only know what I know. And so learning about all the cultures, it's tough and it is fascinating. It is rewarding. I wanted to address, let's see, how do we get people to get over the attitude, not in my neighborhood? So the idea is like so many people, like the murder that was in Bothell. There was a Vietnamese guy who was stabbed in the heart. And people are like, oh, that was just a crazy person. It's always a crazy person. It's not ever a problem. It's just a mental health crazy person. And because people don't want to believe that there's anything bad in their neighborhood, they may be concerned like, oh, am I part of it? Hell no. And so when people say or post online, no, that was just a one-off. No, it was not a one-off, and don't dismiss it. We need to talk about this. And so that's something that you can do is say, oh, did you know that person? Is that why you call them crazy? I mean, it's just like, oh, because they're already dismissing. We need to accept what is happening and ask more about it instead of always, oh, I can't, I've lived here for 50 years. That has not ever happened. We did a program, the Northshore Social Justice Group, which you can all join. We did this program. It was based on, there was an Indian lady, South Asian, whose nanny, who's Indian, was walking strolling the baby. And then this lady was yelling at her and go back to China and whatever. And she was concerned. And so this was on, I don't know, City of Kenmore Neighbors, one of these things. And there was about 300 people or comments. It was really big of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So sorry. So sorry. So sorry. That is nice, but it is not helpful. The sorries really, it's not helpful. And so if people want to be helpful, it's like, okay, let's learn about it, why that happened, and let's get to know our neighbors. And what we did is we put 2 events about creating safe neighborhoods and hoped people came. There were a few people of those 300 who decided to show up on one of these calls. But saying sorry is not quite enough. We need to do.
It's about action. Words, it's like it's ads that you take out, signs. I mean, they serve a purpose, but it's really actions. It's like, I can tell you I'm going to do anything, but until I actually do it. And then you also build trust as well in a community by actually showing people that, hey, I'm willing to go and do something. I think it's a good time, since we only have about 10 minutes, to just start talking about resources. We are having what would you call it? Kind of a part 2 to Unify Shoreline discussion coming up in a month. You could contact me or Jolene to find out the details so we can continue this conversation, because this is just the beginning of a conversation. And then Jolene, maybe you could, I wanted to mention a few things because Lori, I think, is on the call, Gerbeur. I think I said that right. And she had a great listen. Hi there. She had a great listen. She had a great listening session, because there's so many different things that are involved in this, learning how to listen. I've been on several calls where white allies have come on and they're so kind of overwhelmed with processing all this stuff. They've completely dominated the conversation, and the people of color sit back and go, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to listen to them, when they really should be listening to what the people of color have to say and trying to just, take that role. Also, William Bear's here from USOR. That's another group that you can be a part of. But go ahead, Jolene. I know you have some other resources and contact information as well.
Yeah, well, I wanted to give a victory story of one of the Asian allies. So what we do in Asian allies is talk about these things that are happening and how to address them and how to call people out or call them in. I feel like I'm attacked at least once a week, and, building resilience. And these building, attack from my friends, actually, not people outside, not crazy people, but my friends. Nextdoor. So one of our Asian allies who, older white guy, and he didn't know, doesn't know a lot about race. And he posted, again, an event that we were doing, and it got, I don't know, 800 comments or so. And it, again, started with an event. Then it went over to, there's no racism. And what about this over here? And what about this over here? And it went the gamut of all the topics, anything that had to do with race. And it was ridiculous. And people spent probably 30, 40 hours a piece on, and I was counting who are the people who I do not want to encounter, who I'd be scared if they were in Zoom with me or anything. I made a list, and then there was like 10 people who are trying to stand up for Asians. And so it was 145 neighbors, highly engaged neighbors, and 824 comments. And so when we talk about this, we can actually see who is in our neighborhood, what are their beliefs, who are scary people, who are people who are out there to fight. I mean, like to fight the good fight. And he offered the person in this neighborhood, he offered a pancake breakfast. Hey, let's meet in person. Let's talk about it. So I feel like that's what we need. We need to talk about it. And also having like a white host who's already active in that particular thing is so powerful. So I can do something and I could be ignored all day long. But if like, let's say a white male says something, it's like, oh, okay. And so, no, you may not feel powerful at all. It could be like, oh, I'm just whatever. You have much more power in a number of situations. And this is one of them. And so to please use it.
I know the city of Shoreline is doing some things. I know I'm doing a series of videos with the police chief in the chat. Jolene has listed several small actions to create awareness and safety.
What I have envisioned is, at least for me and in Asian allies, is by next year, not next year, but like a full year, probably, I want to have educated 20 police departments, the chiefs of police, as well as the police people and the city staff around Asian hate, Asian cultures. I talked to one of the local chiefs of police, and it's like, he was surprised that the Asian was murdered. I'm like, really? I see stabbings all day long. How is that surprising? And there's no understanding. And so I want, and also to get some legislation going to protect people of color and, of course, Asians. And so I would love, this also includes like safe neighborhoods. I want to have 20 templated neighborhoods who know each other. Who are all the seniors in the neighborhood? Who has health conditions? Who has cats, dogs, whatever's? Who's going on vacation? Are there special needs? So then if we have a heat thing here, or if we have whatever, we can help each other by knowing who's in our neighborhood. How do we get a hold? Like my neighbor, the one who tried to sue me a couple of times for cutting down my tree, like their package is on my door, but I'm like, shoot, I'm on crutches, and plus I don't want to be on their property. Like that shouldn't be the way. Like we should know our neighbors. And so
Yeah. I just wanted to add something. Yeah. And with winter coming sooner than we'd like, it seems, there have been news stories about especially immigrant families, limited English speaking families who had perished. I remember one family down in Kent that their heat went out, and so they had one of those hibachis that they were trying to warm up the house, and the whole family died. So with winter coming up, and knowing that people aren't necessarily going to ask for help, and they might be suffering in silence, just try and do things that start conversations. You see somebody in the driveway, instead of ignoring them, just say, hey, how's it going? Sometimes they just need that one spark to actually create a relationship.
Yeah, and we were brainstorming. Kevin and I are brainstorming, as we do like all day long, about in Shoreline. Could we have like kind of around the world, when more people are vaccinated, like, hey, let's go to this Korean whatever sundubu, hot soup or something, and then we'll talk to the owner, maybe some of the staff, and let's meet 8 people at the table. Let's meet some neighbors. And then next week, okay, let's go to this Russian place. Okay, let's go to this. And like, it'd be so neat to be able to meet people in our community. And so we want to brainstorm. So when we have our Unify Shoreline discussion group, be thinking of how can we meet people around us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So this is JoleneJang.com. This is a timeline of attacks. So here, on the 15th, on the 14th, on the 12th, on the 10th. So this dog wasn't lit on fire, but the guy threatened to light him on fire. And so this is a timeline of all the attacks on Asians. And I just started loading up, but it's often, I think people think that, just a few times. No, it's every day. So, and I haven't put a local one in yet, but our news doesn't really cover it that much, but I will. Thank you all for being here. And I would love to hear feedback personally from all y'all. I'll put I'm JoleneJang.com. And Kevin, we both have a lot of media out there and are rather out there on our online platforms. So thank you for being here. All right.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thanks for all the great things on the chat. Please read those, save that chat. You're able to do that, I believe. I know Fred Sims ended one with talking about microaggressions and how they're like an insidious disease. And a death by 1,000 cuts, I think, comes to mind. I want to take it back to Suni. And thank you all for being here. And I hope I will be able to stay in touch with each and every one of you. I left my email in the chat. And back to you, Suni.
For our presenters, I want to just share a couple things that are coming up. As Jolene and Kevin talked about, there's a huge amount of personal responsibility, and I think all of you, because I know some of you pretty well, you do a lot in your own time and through work, and so I appreciate all of you knowing that you're making the efforts. And then how do we go sort of beyond our interpersonal interactions and think on an organizational level, on a systemic level? And so I know also that a lot of you do that work as well. And want to highlight that next Wednesday, USOR, United Shoreline Organized Against Racism, is hosting a listening session that is going to be focused on alternative response models to police. And so if you're interested in that, please, you can email me and I can also send more information. I'll send a follow-up email about that. And also, as Jolene mentioned, next Saturday, or I mentioned earlier, there is another session focused on StopAsianHate. And one of the pieces that, there's all sorts of levels that are involved in a community being anti-racist. And one of the suggestions has been around, developing a visual kind of image that shows our feeling as a community for being inclusive. And so in August, which is Celebrate Shoreline's annual event, we had a project getting ideas and thoughts from community members around what makes the community anti-racist. And so we used some of those ideas to do this Welcoming Place for All logo creation. So there's 3 options that a graphic designer was inspired by some of the resident input. And if you'd like to vote on a logo design, feel free to go to that webpage. But and if you have other questions, there's some other opportunities that we'll be hosting, as Kevin and Jolene said, maybe in a month. There's a lot of different ideas, but what as a community would you like to see the city putting resources and time and effort into? We really want to hear that. So again, thank you all. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we hope to look seeing you all again soon.
Thank you for being here, and I'll be on the line for a few minutes if anybody wants to say